Hi, my name's Simon Baker and welcome to the first webinar in our Building Marketplaces in Challenging Times series. In this webinar, we're going to look at the impact of the coronavirus and what you can do about it. Underlying this webinar is a survey that we conducted of around 200 C-level leaders from around the world. I hope you enjoy this webinar and I look forward to seeing you at a future one. And just to really kick things off, just how dramatic that impact has been is that we've taken 15 listed stocks from around the world, and we've looked at the impact on a 28-day period from really the 21st of February when the market started to reflect the impact of the coronavirus. You know, the average decrease across all these stocks has been at 40-odd%, more than Dow Jones around 30 and Nasdaq around 27%. A lot of value has been destroyed, and that's across the group, with Zillow, of course, and its iBuyer model being most hit. When we look at what that translates to, is we have overall about $90 billion worth of value being wiped off these listed company stocks in literally a 4-week period. And that doesn't take into account the hundreds of other businesses operating within the online classifieds and marketplaces segments. So, you know, you can probably multiply that by a significant amount more to understand just the true value destruction that's been occurring over the last 4 weeks. So we thought, well, what we would do is then run a webinar that does a couple of things. We've run a survey over the last 6 or 7 days, around 200 respondents now from companies around the world. And we've said we want to discuss what the impact has been of the coronavirus on all aspects of the marketplace's business. And then we'll look at what companies are doing. We'll identify clear next steps that a company can undertake to weather this storm and to be in a better and stronger position once you come out of the other side. And that's a very critical aspect here. This will end. We don't know exactly when, but it will end at some point in time, and we will resume, maybe not normal service, but we will resume more like we had about a month ago. Now, behind this is a lot of research being done in talking to C-level leaders around the world. We ran a survey. At the moment, when I put this survey this together, we'd had 182 respondents. That's now closer to 200. 3/4 of which are either C-level or board members, and they've shared their thoughts around all aspects of their business. What is very important to see here is that we've had a very good mix of companies responding across the board, from the small startup right through to the large multinational corporates with over 500 employees. And we've had all parts of the world respond. From, you know, clearly Western Europe, where we're focusing this conference call on today, and Eastern Europe make up around 50% of the response, but then we've had very good response from the rest of the world. So based on that, we've been able to pull together an agenda that really covers all aspects of a business. We're going to look at how we direct, you know, what's been the direct impact of the coronavirus on businesses. We're going to look at the overall financial performance and how that's been impacted or likely to be impacted by the coronavirus and this current crisis. We'll then start to dive into various aspects of a company. The customers, advertisers, and sales. Clearly, if their business is not operating well, our businesses can't operate well. The product development and technology areas of the company. What are the opportunities that are created by this crisis? We'll look at consumer traffic and engagement. How are people from the consumer side really engaging now, and, you know, what the impact has been on inquiry generation. We'll look at then employees and working arrangements, because at the end of the day, employees are the largest cost center within any one of these businesses. We'll look at funding and M&A, because without cash and without the preservation of cash or access to cash, a company does have no future. And then finally, we'll look at next steps and what to do. Now, throughout this process, what's happened is a number of people have asked questions. I'll put those questions together and put them at the end, and we'll work through each one of them separately. Questions just popped up around whether this presentation will be shared completely straight after this conference call. You'll receive it via email. We just had a few technical issues before the conference call that stopped us from sending it out. So you'll absolutely get a copy of this completely as you see it. So then let's start to working, well, what has been the direct impact of the coronavirus? Well, what we've seen throughout the world is that people are in lockdown. Most of the world, people are either in complete lockdown, unable to leave their homes, or in partial lockdown, where there's limited accessibility to go to a workplace, meet with people, and so on. I personally am sitting in a complete lockdown place, only allowed to leave the house to go to the supermarket, go to the doctor if I had to go there, or go for a walk no more than 500 meters from the house to do some exercise. That creates restrictions on a business. Now, let's not just focus on the marketplace business, but also creates restrictions on our customers' businesses. In a lockdown environment, if you're a real estate agent, for example, you can't do open for inspections, you can't meet vendors, you can't hold auctions. It puts a lot of limitations on how your business operates. Partial lockdown really has a similar effect at the end of the day. It's changing the mindset of the complete society and market that you operate in. And you therefore have to change your mindset on how you operate in those markets. Now, what are the restrictions that are being put in place? In most countries, around 65%, we're starting to see government restrictions on business. And these restrictions are a whole range of things that are occurring. We've got, the UK government's been very specific to say that real estate agencies will close their business, and they've ordered them to be closed. They are not an essential service around the world. Same with car dealers and so on. Non-essential persons have to work from home, no mass gatherings. Social distancing has to be respected. You can't move around, you can't travel from point A to point B. And these restrictions vary from, please don't do it, as some countries are saying, and Australia's saying, please don't do it, and people just break the rules, through to places such as, I'm in the moment in France or in Italy, or in Spain, where it's far more tighter, the lockdowns. If you do break the rules, you do go out and you don't have a valid reason, you're getting a fine, 135 euros in my case. Not that I've had one yet, but I have been pulled over a couple of times by the police, and you have to have the right documentation. Right through to, you go to Peru, where my wife is from, and there are literally armed guards, the military running up and down the street, and people are just being arrested. No questions asked. You are outside. You are arrested. You're taken to jail. There's a very important case, not important case, an interesting case a couple of days ago of a father and daughter actually surfing. They were pulled up by the police and taken straight to jail in their wetsuits. Not kidding on that point. So there's a very vast range of these lockdowns and what's happening. It's just making the whole world operate in a different way. And when people are working from home, life is becoming a lot more challenging as well, because schools are closed. In many parts of the world, you are stuck within 130 meter, 140 meter square meter apartment with family, kids, and you're still trying to work in that environment. That provides a range of other challenges as well. So these restrictions are having an impact on businesses. So when we spoke to the C-level managers around the world and we said, how is this impact occurring today? 75% there is a significant impact on the business or a slightly negative impact on the business, and they expect that to worsen. The way you read these charts is from left to right. Green in this case is bad, significant negative impact. That'll be consistent across all these charts. Blue is slightly negative impact. So those are the two that we need to look at. And the C-level leaders expect it to get worse before it gets better. So that's the news. And then the question is, how long is it going to last for? So when we ask the C-level leaders, well, how long do you think the direct impact of the coronavirus, lockdowns and impacting on how business performs is going to happen. The median was around 8 months. The average was around 8 months. The median is around 6 months. So let's call it 6 to 8 months that this is likely to have a direct impact on a business. This is not a 1 month issue. This is not back to work by Easter as Donald Trump is trying to tell the US market. This is going to have a much longer impact on countries. So we then say, and then once the restrictions are lifted, how long is it going to take? And we're starting to get back to business as usual. How long do the C-level leaders expect it to take to become back to business as usual? And there's far less agreement here. And as you can see, it's all over the shop. People just do not know how long it's likely to take to get back to business as usual. So the average here is around 8 months. The median is 7 months. So let's call it 7 to 8 months. But in reality, it could be anything from a short period of time right up through to a year. So given that, we're really in for a tough time for what is likely to be 12 to 18 months of pain. And giving that in mind, that then really creates an environment that we need to think about all aspects of the business and how we operate in what is fundamentally a new world for all operations. So let's now look further into the overall financial performance and the expected impact, current impact and expected impact on that. When our business leaders were asked about, what's the current chances of achieving your budget, almost everyone said, I'm going to underachieve it. Either half said significantly underachieve, and another 40% said, I'm going to slightly underachieve. My hypothesis is, and we're going to run this survey again next week, so we're going to give it 2 weeks to see how the attitude has changed. It's going to then, we believe it's going to move more to significantly underachieve. But what's more important is that over 50% say their business, the viability of their business, the existence of their business is fundamentally at risk. The majority saying it's in the short term, with about another 15-20% saying it's in the long term. Therefore, if actions aren't taken today and drastic actions aren't taken today, their business just won't be there in the future. And that is a very, very important point. And underlying all of this, and it's a theme that's going to come back again and again and again, is cash is king. You need to have adequate, strong cash reserves in place to ensure that you can work through this current turbulent market. So when we said, well, have you done any reforecasting taking the coronavirus impact into account? Surprisingly, not everyone has. And the businesses I'm involved in have done reforecasting. We've asked them to go through and say, what's the impact likely to be on your business, so that we can work out what the cost base needs to be given the likely revenue streams. Okay, and then what's that outcome of the reforecasting? For those who've done it, not surprisingly, all the targets have come down, and that's been driven by a dramatic decrease in the revenue streams that are likely to be earned by the company. None of this should be news to anyone, but please make sure you've done your reforecasting and keep revisiting that reforecast. I've been working, over the last week, I've probably worked with 8 different companies on looking at their financials, the impact of the coronavirus. And it's not just look at it once, we're looking at it 3, 4, 5 times. One large company I've been helping, we've had 3 board meetings in 10 days looking at how we dramatically change the scope and structure of the business, looking even potentially of reducing the workforce by 50%. That is the level of concern that these companies are placing on this exact moment in time. Now, when we talk about the impact and on the impact on revenue, as we can see over here on the left-hand side, current impact on the revenues 80% of respondents said yes, there is a current impact on revenues, and they expect it to be across the board. Listing revenues are being certainly impacted. 85% of C-level leaders have said, we've got major issues on our revenues on listings revenue, value-added service or depth revenues. They think of them as bigger ads at the top of the search. Basically, just more powerful advertising is clearly going to be impacted as agents or car dealers or whomever your customer is has a choice about whether they buy those products. And then sales revenue, that's the sale of properties, the sale of cars, is dramatically going to be impacted. And for the very obvious reason that you have to go back to your customer. And your customer is the agent or the car dealer, and then you have to go to their customer. And you say, well, if I'm someone who is living in a house today, am I likely to take the risk of selling that house, knowing that there may not be anyone to buy it, and buying a new house? Will I get financing? Will I even have a job in 3 months, 2 months to pay for any mortgage? I'm already renting a house. Am I going to change that rental for uncertainty? Will I find a new rental? Can I pay an increased rent? People will try to downsize. People don't know what the values of properties are going to be. There's talk of properties decreasing by 10% in prices as demand drops down, but homes need to be cleared out of the market. And the same for cars. Why would I bother buying a new car? I can't drive. I'm locked down. I can't even leave the house. I don't need a new car. I need to put food on the table, find out how to social distance myself from my family some days in 130 square meters, and so on. So there's a lot of other issues that are on people's minds at the moment, rather than buying a new car, buying a new house. Okay. Questions popped up as we go. Thank you for that. Do you recommend focusing on rentals more than real estate sales? Yes, over time we'll see that as a bit of a theme. I think rentals is something that will become more important, probably for two reasons. There'll be a bunch of people who, for whatever reasons, over the next 3 to 6 months, they'll be foreclosed upon. They won't have a job. They won't be able to pay their mortgage. They will have to leave their current owned house. Or they've lost their job, etc., and they need to downsize and get a smaller rental. And the second thing is that rentals are far more able to be handled in an environment where I don't actually have to go and see it. I'm not buying it. I'm not buying it for the long term. I'm going to use it for a 12, 24-month period. So that's far more open to all remote viewings, documents being done online, deposits being paid, etc. So combined all of that, I think that rentals will provide a bigger opportunity for marketplaces in the short to medium term than the traditional sales market. But we'll look more about that when we get the Q&A session later on. We then say, well, what's happening? How people are responding. Here are some iBuyers in the US, because there's a very good example of people who are really knee deep operating as real estate agents, operating as buyers and sellers in a market. And all of them have said, you know what, I'm not buying any more property. I'm not buying it because I'm probably overpaying and the demand's not there to sell it. I don't want to get stuck with all the stock on my books. So then we have this sort of environment now where we say, well, let's take a step back. I think that is a good indicator of what the rest of the world is going to look like. And I think, the comments here by the CEO of Redfin are very important. January and February this year were very strong months. They were up 27% year on year. Yet in March, it's 1% year on year. It's literally fallen off the edge of a cliff. And given that, they've just suspended. So that, I think, is reflective of what we're seeing across the market. If we talk to agents, etc., in other markets, then they're literally seeing demand dry up. Homes people aren't turning up to open inspections. If they can, if they can't, clearly some physically locked down, so they're not able to. Auction results in Australia, as an example, have dried up, and so on. People are now saying we're going to have to wait to the next buying season or selling season. So there's a lot of concern happening out there in the market. It's rippling through every aspect.
Then we asked CEOs about, well, what's going to happen to your expenses? And not surprisingly, 80% have basically said, yeah, we're going to have to cut expenses, with over 50% saying very highly likely. None of that's rocket science. It is clear that that's what you have to do, and it's across the board, whether it's employee costs, marketing costs, or external suppliers. We're going to have to dramatically reduce what we're doing, and really focus in on the bare bones to keep the lights on, keep the business moving, and preparing ourselves for what's next, which I think is a very important theme that we will see out of this. So then we have to say, okay, now let's dive deeper into operational aspects. And the next 4 areas are all around the impact on the customer, the impact on product development, consumer traffic, and then employees, and what the impact is there. Now, on our customers, when asked around what's the impact on your customer's business, because without a healthy customer, it's much harder for you to make money. And basically 90% have said the impact is either negative, slightly negative, or dramatically negative, and it's going to get worse. The green bar is sort of going ballistic here. And I'm sure if I run this analysis again in a week, that green bar is going to be off the charts. Well, clearly can't be off the charts, but we way more to the right-hand side. The expectation is that our customers are going to become in more and more trouble, whether it's a dealer, a developer, a car dealer, or a real estate agent. It's not pretty out there at all, and there's really not many markets at all where you can say that there is anything positive happening at this point in time. Then you say, well, what's going to happen by them? Are they going to continue to spend money, or are they going to reduce? And not surprisingly, over 80% have said there's highly likely and somewhat likely to reduce their spend on marketplaces. It just makes sense. Just as you are going to think about reducing your spend on marketing, they're going to reduce their spend on marketing. It's just the daisy chain that we all live in. And it's going to be across the board. Listing products, value-added services. It's just going to happen to everything that the spend will be reduced. And it's going to happen from two aspects. One is there's going to be less listings being advertised. Maybe not because they don't have the listings, it's because they know that just the buyers aren't there. And if the buyers aren't there, why am I going to advertise those listings? So they'll buy less of your products. And of course, they're going to then say, well, I don't need to make these go to the top of the search. I don't need to make them bigger and bolder and brighter than the others, so they stand out, because there's just no buyers in the market. The other aspect, of course, is their reduction of their spend on you is going to be because they're going out of business, or they're just not going to pay their bills. So you'll raise invoices against them, but they just won't pay. And we're starting to see that in a number of markets where the defaults or the collections are dramatically increasing as customers start to not pay their bills. So keep that in mind. Just because you're selling stuff doesn't mean you're going to get paid. So maybe even consider getting paid in advance. Or providing a service, maybe you do that in exchange for a discount. You give me some cash up front, I'll give you 50% discount, we'll provide the service. Okay. Now, then we have to say, well, what are the initiatives that people are doing today in terms of portals out there? So let's run through these. Realtor.com and Zillow in the US have both gone straight in for a price cut. 50% off for Zillow, 60% off price reduction on monthly subscriptions for Realtor.com. Zillow's was for the next month only, which was rather strange. I think they're probably thinking this is all going to be over very fast, and unfortunately it won't be. That's likely to have an impact of $60 to $70 million just for the monthly revenues just on this year. So it gives you an idea of how much value is at risk for them. On the market in the UK, had a 33% reduction in fees for 3 months, but it's only agents on full tariff listing agreements. Once again, it's when you start putting these caveats around that, the market's going to, the markets being the agents and the developers are sort of going to say, come on, I'm in pain. You need to share the pain. The likely impact for them is only less than 5% decrease in revenues for the current financial year. In Australia, where realestate.com.au dominates and there's a vendor paid advertising market, what's happening there is, realestate.com.au has generously delayed their price increase. If I'm saying sarcastic, because clearly you're not going to put through an 8% price increase on the 1st of July. That would be just seen as crazy in this market. So it's not, it's just being pragmatic. And honestly, it's not really helping the agents because they're still paying for the value-added services products. So it's not really helping them. And they've given the capacity to relist or re-upgrade listings for free. But once again, if no one's buying, is that really of any value anyway? Because I probably wouldn't have bought the product again, so I'm not really saving money. They've had to withdraw guidance in the market. Scout24 has deferred payments for up to 9 months. Once again, it's no discount. It's just saying, the money you owe me, you can pay me in 9 months' time. I've got a feeling though in 9 months' time, a lot of their customers won't be there. And when they get the bill for 9 months worth of advertising, they're going to be not in a position to pay it or not very happy about having to pay it. So my expectation is that that's going to end up being a problem that's just booted down the line for them. You can have free private listings for a period of 4 weeks, and once the market comes back, there'll be free vendor leads for those who are still customers. So once again, that's tied. You want new properties to sell, you better be making sure you pay those 9 months worth of fees that were deferred. I think that's not going to work too well or be very well received in the long term by their customers. Property Guru in Singapore said, I'm going to give you a 50% price reduction for new agents. And in addition, if you're a current customer, I'm going to give you 5% additional discount for renewing. Once again, I think portals are underestimating the pain that their customers are going to go through and are not really coming to the party in the same way that a Realtor.com or a Zillow is in the US with significant price decreases. There have been some other initiatives that one could argue have missed the mark. I think Rightmove is probably the most well-known one for those who've been following it. They initially, remember the average agent in the UK on Rightmove pays over £1,000 a month out of their own pocket. There's no vendor paid advertising. So that's a material part of their income stream. And their initial offer was, well, you can defer payment of half that money, £500 per branch per month for 3 months, or you can defer fundamentally a quarter of that per branch per month for 6 months. But that's just a deferral. So you still got to pay it in that period of time. And given the expectations that this is going to go longer than a month or 2 months or 3 months, it's clearly going to hit the agents right in the middle of what is going to be a fundamentally challenging time. You take 6 months for now and you're basically in August or September, those 3 to 6 months, which is the holiday period in the United Kingdom. That's not, peak selling period. Agents are still going to be paying. Clearly the agents got together and say, come on, this is crazy. They started the Say No to Rightmove site. A lot of agents signed up and a lot of pressure was placed on Rightmove literally in the space of a few days. And that then suddenly got replaced by a far more pragmatic option of saying, well, you know what, we're going to reduce our invoices by 75% for the next 4 months. And especially when you're earning over 200 million EBITDA of that 275 million pounds, so you've got a very high EBITDA margin of 75%, sacrificing 65 to 70 million in revenues, I think is very pragmatic and will be very helpful. And Zoopla has also done another interesting one, which I think is actually going to create a problem. They've said, you know what, we're going to do it's free of charge for agents with less than 30 branches. So it's about 80% of the agents in the United Kingdom, that if they sign an 18-month contract after the free listings period, they'll get 9 months free if they leave Rightmove and 5 months free if they don't leave Rightmove. Now, I think that would have worked well if they didn't have those two caveats at the bottom, because it's seen, the commentary is it's seen as being sort of profiteering out of this crisis situation, and agents tend to not like this. I understand what's trying to be achieved in terms of using this as a competitive moment, but I also think that you've got to be also doing it in a way that is not seen as, well, is not seen as taking advantage. It's just saying that I think based on the commentary that's been reading, it's being reading at the moment is not going down as well as it could be going down. So then we look at product development and technology. And then we say, well, what are the things that people are doing there, and what is the feeling in the market, the potential impact? Interestingly enough, C-level leaders don't see this as as big an issue. Yes, there's going to be some impact, some negative impact, around 10%. There'll be some slight impact, but most feel like over 50% is okay, or even potentially positive, which is an interesting way to think about it. The pipeline, they're not going to think it's negatively going to impact that. Yes, it's going to impact the technology team because we're probably going to let a few people go in this process, but it does create opportunity. And so then when we spoke to them about what was the opportunity being created, we then said, well, we have the capacity to put, are you going to put product development on hold? And the answer was, for the majority, no, we're not putting product on hold. But what we are going to do is use this as a chance to create new and innovative products. We're going to develop products that help the customers in the current environment: virtual tours, virtual reality, remote appointments. We're thinking about the future. What can I build in a world where everything is more remote? Everything is handled in a very different way. We want to improve our product development process and timeline. So we're taking this as a breathing opportunity to go back and look at how we do things to drive more efficiency and effectiveness. How do we do it? Build working in remote locations, as this is likely to become a default way of running a business, with more and more employees working from home into the future. How do we then make this an everyday part of life? It reduces our facilities costs, reduces all the other bits and pieces that can really impact how I run a business. How do we think about having a fully remote or online sales team for dealing with advertisers, self-serving with customers? This moment in time is likely to change their attitude to self-serve, their attitude to just remotely working with me. Well, if I can then build a set of tools for that future, then I can reduce my costs of operation and then be much better off. Digital retailing, how can we sell properties, sell cars better, smarter in the future through remote products and services? And of course, we're saying, well, why don't we use this as a chance to focus on building new alliances and partnerships? There are other people who are in the same problem that we have, so maybe we can come together, complementary technologies, and very much work on building a stronger future. So it's been seen as an opportunity to do something different and innovative, not as just focus internally on survival. So here's some people who are doing that already. There's 4 examples. Lifel in Japan have released an app to help agents connect to their customers remotely. The Japanese environment is very well suited to remote operations. People are very, they like to follow the rules, and there's very things well organized and structured, so they can do online consultations, virtual property tours, and you can complete the required documentation. I remember Lifel focuses a lot on the rental market, so they can continue the flow of transactions occurring, which is critical in a market where if it stops and their business model is reliant on the sale of leads stop, revenues stop, their business stops. Hemnet has launched a live streaming of home viewings for agents and products to streamline transaction and to streamline transactions with limited human interaction. Same problem they're solving. My customer, the agent in this case, can't physically meet the buyer, the renter, the landlord, or the seller. How do I run all that remotely? Using Zoom, using online applications. Funda just created a week-long hackathon to focus on fresh data and insights for customers. How do they take all that information they've got and turn it into something very, very useful. And then how do they also support, once again, remote viewings of products? And then REA Today in Australia launched a digital inspection feature, allowing agents to use videos to showcase listings to potential buyers. Once again, it's solving this social distancing problem, and allowing agents to, as best as possible, continue to do business. Don't know the results yet because some of these things are very, very new, but suffice to say, it's trying to stimulate the underlying market. Now, clearly, they will not be able to change society attitudes towards buying, renting, selling, and leasing. They won't be able to change society attitudes to the amount of price being paid for these products, because no data model out there is going to truly value a property taking this crisis into account. They can just give an estimate that's dropped 5, 10, 15%, and they can't change whether people have a job or not. But they're trying to influence and impact what they can in this whole process. So then we look at consumer traffic and engagement. Now, here's interesting in that, not surprising, most companies overall have reported a decrease in traffic. Sessions are down, frequency of visits are down, and the bounce rates improve, has increased, but not so much. So the people who are visiting the sites are at least interacting. Now, what some people have reported is an actual increase in traffic, and the reason being is now a lot of people are at home, they are bored, they have watched as much Netflix as they can for the short period of time. The kids are driving them crazy. They can't leave the house. There's only so much shopping you can do in life by going to the supermarket as an excuse to get out and get some fresh air. And they're diving into some of their passions, one of which is looking at property. So the next thing is saying, well, am I generating real traffic to the site, or is this traffic that is very much focused on just tire kicking, just looking around, amusing themselves? What's happening to the housing market? Are the prices starting to fall? Because that would be the natural inclination that someone would have. What does it mean for me? And given that, what we're seeing is that the engagement is starting to decrease. The average session duration is being negatively impacted. Not massively, just the blue bar is sort of showing it's being negatively impacted, and the number of listings being viewed is decreasing. But that's probably a function of the number of listings being advertised being decreased, not necessarily the number of listings physically being looked at by people decreasing. As the listings go down, clearly the amount you can look at will also go down. But the most telling outcome is the inquiries generated is dropping. And we can see that here, 40% think there'll be a significant impact in email inquiries, telephone inquiries, and chat started, and then there'll be so you take the slightly negative impact as well, and you're now into the 70% range, 70 to 80% range. That's going to be a dramatic impact on a business, because if you're not driving leads to your customers aren't transacting. If they're not transacting, they're not going to pay you. If they're not going to pay you, you've got a problem. And that's what's either happening or going to happen in really the majority of markets around the world. When I did some slicing and dicing of the information by various markets, it didn't really change. The sentiment was very much consistent across all markets. So what are people going to do around their marketing expenses? Well, they do believe they're going to have to reduce their budgets. Once again, it's about 70 or 80% said, I'm going to reduce my marketing budget, and it's going to come out of Google and search and vertical search sites and online marketing and outdoor TV and radio, which are clearly, I've got no idea why you'd be doing that. And this time, because all you're doing is advertising your brand to people who aren't going to interact with you. So given that, you have this double effect, right? I've got to save money. It reduces traffic. It reduces the volume of leads generated. So you have this spiral down that's starting to occur in some of these markets. Then we have a look at, well, what's happening on the employee and the working arrangement side, because this is really at the core. Without people, you don't really have a business. the majority of your costs in most circumstances, and they have the capacity, if all aligned and pulled together in these tough times, to go in one direction, or the conversation to be very internally focused and you spiral even faster going in the other direction. So, when asked the very obvious question, do you think that this is going to have an impact on your employees, and what's the expected impact? It's currently bad and going to get worse, would be the summary there. And that's for a whole number of reasons. And we'll look at them shortly, but it's everything from reduction in work hours, reduction in salary packages, losing of jobs, having to work from home, having to deal with family issues while trying to work, not being able to interact with your customers if you're in the sales area. There's just one issue after another, after another, after another that's being created by this crisis. Now, most employees are working from home. As you can see here, roughly 85% of employees are working from home, so only 15% are still coming to the office, and I'm guarantee if I do this survey again in a week or two, that number will be even smaller. It won't go to zero. Surprising enough, I was having a chat yesterday with Georg Schmiel, who runs GUI IQI in Asia, and their Singapore office has reopened. So the strong management by the Chinese government of the coronavirus crisis has meant that they feel safe that they can reopen offices in Singapore. He didn't mention Wuhan, clearly, because they don't have an office there, but they've got offices have opened in Singapore and people are going back to work. Do I think that's going to replicate around the world? Not so fast, because the capacity of the government to manage the interactions of people in China is far greater, and the desire by people to comply with government requirements is also far greater. As you move to Western European and Latin American type markets, people don't comply. The social distancing doesn't take place. So the coronavirus and its impact is going to be far stronger and far deadlier. And the lockdown and those sort of environments will stay in place for a very long time. Most companies do provide for work from home arrangements. I have no idea why those small 5 to 10% don't. If they don't now, they sure as hell will be doing in the next week or so. So then, what's the impact going to be? Because when people work from home, there's a bunch of impacts that they can have on people. There's going to be the impact on the business, which people, the C leaders are saying it's going to have a 60% negative impact on the business. Productivity is going to be lower. They're worried about that. Morale will be impacted dramatically. And of course, how do you manage people who are spread across a broad environment? My conversations with leaders, it sort of fits into two categories. The tech guys, it's business as usual. They are used to sitting next to each other and communicating by Slack, rather than even talking to each other, even if they're only 1 or 2 meters away. Sales guys love to have a chat. They need that social interaction, and a lot of the communication that's occurring outside of the management stream is just rubbish communication. People sharing emojis and stupid clips off the internet just to pass the time. And so I think the biggest challenge is going to come is, how do you manage a workforce that is remote in a way that maintains their productivity, and also in an environment where they've got massive distractions from family, kids. I mean, I've been on phone calls this week where I've been talking to someone and the kid's popped up on someone's shoulder going, "Hey, Mum, who's that?" Okay, and kids just don't have an understanding of this new world, or there are new babies who are waking up, and I've been talking to people who've gone to have to sit out on the balcony so they can have a conversation. So this is changing the way we work. I believe that over time, this impact of working from home will decrease and will be seen far more as a no impact or potentially positive impact, as the systems and products, and processes are put in place to better manage these remote working environments. And you've got to think about that today, because this is probably going to be the new norm. And if you can have a broader workforce working from home over a longer period of time, your costs of running a business will decrease. So you have to keep that in mind about how you think about the business of the future and how you use this time to change the way you operate. Are you going to keep recruiting people? The answer is no. There's no surprise there. Either the recruitment's been temporarily or completely halted for an extended period of time. That's not good for the job sites. Clearly, that's going to have a negative impact because it's not just the marketplaces industry, but it's also all other industries are putting recruitment on hold. Some critical roles will be replaced. Clearly, if you lose your CFO or such, then you've got to be very much understanding how you're going to handle that situation. And there's around 50% of people are likely to, or highly likely or somewhat likely to downsize their workforce. That's just a natural outcome of this whole environment where people are going to have to reduce the number of people who are working for them. Now, when we're saying, well, are you going to reduce the volume of people or are you going to reduce employee packages? Half of them said we're highly likely to reduce employee packages. Once again, in 2 weeks, that number is going to be far more than highly likely. And somewhat likely it's I already have reduced their packages. I've spent a lot of time on phone calls with people talking about, can I reduce my packages by 25%, 50% reduction? Can I get government subsidies to help me through this period? Can I reduce the number of working hours? So they've gone from a full day to half days, and so on. There are a number of ways in which these the employee packages can be impacted. In Australia, for example, a number of employees are being suspended, which means that the company's basically saying, we're going into hibernation, no one has a job, but no one's fired. I'm not paying you, but you're not fired. You can draw down your leave. So if you have leave owing, then we'll pay you out of that. And then once we've come through the other side of this crisis, you are reactivated to work. Now, what's interesting around that is the largest example is Qantas, the airline. They've stopped all international flights. They've stopped 60% of domestic flights, and they've suspended, so stood down, asked to basically sit on the bench, 20,000 people while this crisis rages because they can't afford to pay them and have jets sitting on the ground. It just doesn't mathematically add up. So they've said, well, you're not fired. If you want to resign, that's your call. But so they're very much leveraging the employment laws to their benefit. In each country, there'll be different laws. Brazil, for example, is looking at allowing companies to reduce packages by 50%. Honduras has made it illegal to fire people. Good luck there. There's a whole bunch of interesting things that are occurring out there in the markets. And then the use of contract staff, not contact, but contract staff. Most companies say they're not going to use contract staff. I think what they haven't taken into account here is what happens if a third of your workforce catches the coronavirus? What's going to happen then? How are you going to maintain whatever you're doing? Then I think you'll see that more and more people will use some contract staff in those circumstances. Let's wait and see. Funding and M&A. Now, this is clearly a important aspect. Cash is king. So if you don't have enough cash, you're going to have to raise cash. If you don't, and you don't want to have an issue here. So when asked about, what's the impact on funding and M&A on a company, the answer is huge. Nearly 80% of the respondents said they're going to have either a negative impact, a significant or slight negative impact on their cash reserves. Pretty obvious, revenues are going to drop, they're going to have employees, and we're going to have to think about what we do in that process. Capital raising is going to have a very significant negative impact. Over half of them said, if I have to capital raise, it's going to be a problem. And it's going to be a problem because of, and we'll see later on, prices will go down. Who's going to invest in companies at the moment when they know they can wait and see who comes through the period of crisis with a real business that's able to sustain, who innovates, who really thinks about the problem in a creative way and creates significant shareholder value. And then we have M&A efforts. And once again, people are saying, this is going to have a significant impact on the M&A efforts. Why? Because I'm going to it's the other side of the coin, right? If I'm buying someone or trying to merge with someone, I'm probably going to pay too much. So I want to bring the value, the amount I pay down. I think if listed company stocks have decreased in price by 40-odd%, 41% on average, unlisted stocks will have decreased significantly more. That's the reality of that situation. So this is, once again, makes life tough. If you have cash today and you're able to maintain those cash reserves and run your business and still have money left, then you will be in a much better position. Now, capital raising, given the expectations of the length of the impact, so we talked about that before, 6 to 8 months, how likely are you to undertake capital raising in 6 months' time? And the answer is 66%, 2/3 are likely or somewhat likely or highly likely to undertake capital raising. And if I do that, most of them think it's going to be at a reduced valuation. Once again, replay this same conversation in 2 weeks and the valuations are going to go down, or the expectation of a lower valuation is going to change as well. Now, what do you do? Okay, that's really quite important. So we've walked through the impact. It's going to impact all parts of the business. The least part is probably going to be product development and giving you the capacity to really drive innovation. Why is that? Because you control it. When you think about all these things, you control it. You can't control what happens for your customers, your advertising sales, and the impact on your revenue. You can't control what is happening with your consumer traffic and their engagement. That's out of your control. You can control what you do with your resources, whether they work from home, how many people you keep, and what you then work on. So then the question is, well, what do you need to do? First of all, make sure you've got a coronavirus leadership team or steering team in place. Pretty obvious thing to do, right? Interestingly enough, 1/3 of people don't have one in place. I was very surprised at that. I thought, well, isn't it quite obvious that you need to have a group of people in positions of knowledge, power, or understanding to provide you with advice and guidance? I've helped, as I said, a good 8 to 10 different companies over the last 8 days, or listen to them talk about their issues and how they're approaching them. And what I found out is that the teams they do put in place are cross-functional teams, made up of board members, made up of the CEO, CFO, COO, which I left off this list, but it's the same as the CEO, really. Sales and marketing, product technology. Some have customers involved. I don't think you need to, because some of the conversations are quite hard. HR should be involved. I don't see why only 1/3 of people have got HR involved on their team. You should have it. 100% should have HR involved. And external advisors, because you're not the only ones going through this. As I said, I've sat through a lot of conversations. The most challenging one's been for a large company who has, we've had 3 board meetings in 10 days with people from 4 or 5 different countries dialing in and working out, do we reduce the workforce by 30, 50, or 70%? And if so, what's the impact on doing that? Impact on revenues, and trying to really understand how that all fits together before you pull the trigger. You don't want to die a death of 1,000 cuts of fire some people today and 2 weeks' time fire more people and fire more people and fire more people. That just creates a bad environment and makes it very challenging for everyone to focus on what we need them to focus on, which is maintaining whatever revenues we can, and then focusing on building more functionality and what the world is going to look like post-crisis. The next step you've got to put in place is to develop a clear, well thought out strategy, including a cash basis reforecast. I've seen a bunch of forecasts that are done on a revenue basis. Revenue is nice theoretically, but in reality, unless you collect it all, it ain't real. So given that, you need to do a cash-based forecast. It's not when you're going to invoice someone, it's when you're going to physically collect it. And a lot of these markets, people are going to delay payments by 1, 2, 3 months, maybe forever. So do a cash-based reforecast. Assume there's going to be much longer than expected. A lot of people are thinking this is a 3-month episode, but as we've seen, the consensus of C-level people is it's a 6 to 8 month dramatic impact before we start to come out of out of the tunnel and start to regrow the business. But business as usual is 18 months. So how do you plan for 18 months? Not 3. Very, very important. Focus on what is essential and valuable for long-term growth. A lot of companies are going to be chasing uncatchable revenues. Yes, you're going to try to sign up new customers, but the problem is the current customers, the current customers aren't probably going to change what's happening today because they're busy dealing with other issues. So signing them up is going to be hard unless you've got something truly valuable to them. Don't invest a lot of time in chasing them if it doesn't make sense. Secondly, focus your resources on what the world is going to look like post-crisis. How am I going to build a business that's going to operate in the new world, whatever you think that new world is going to look like? And if you're in rentals, you're in car sales, you're in car leasing, or you're in property sales, new home, doesn't really matter. Everything's going to look a little different. Some a lot different, some a little different. How do you take this moment to rewrite what you're doing and capture the value from that? Assume revenues and collections will be significantly hit. A number of things I've seen is, we're going to lose 10, 20, 30%. Try 50, 60 or 70%. And they're going to be hit because either you're going to offer discounts to keep the customers happy, or they're going to churn, or they're not going to pay. One of those 3 things are going to occur. Strip out any unnecessary costs and be brutal in that whole process. Marketing, people, facilities. If everyone's working from home, why are you paying someone for an office? A couple of my businesses operate out of service offices. Leases have been cancelled. Right, 1 month notice, done, gone. And I don't think we'll ever go back to a service office environment. We'll just keep working from a home-based environment from now on. Very important. Now, you need a framework to think through it. I think this is a very good framework. This is from Sequoia. Now, what the framework does is it says we've got the macro, things that are out of your control. Out of your control is how long you're in lockdown in your market. Now, lockdown doesn't mean I'm locked in a room and cannot leave. Lockdown means I can't operate business the way I used to, or my customers can't operate business fully the way they used to. There might be out of lockdown, but there's social distancing. There could be out of lockdown, but no more gatherings than 5, 10 people. No travel, who knows, right? And then along that, you just say, well, what's the likely revenue loss? I've got a lockdown for 3 months and a 30% revenue loss, a lockdown for 6 months and 70% revenue loss. Who knows? Okay. You need to think of the scenarios that are relevant to you. And then there are things that are in your control. You control your OPEX. I'll break OPEX out into non-salary and salary-based OPEX. And I'm going to say, well, there's no change to my plan. I keep spending the money I'm currently spending it. Plan B, plan C, I reduce. And what this gives you is a calculation of how much cash you'll have at the end of 2020. Okay? What do I need to do to have a 24-month runway? What do I need to have an 18-month runway? You just get to play with this framework to help you think about how best to present the business. That allows you to then work out what's your current cash position, what's the likely impact from these various scenarios, so that you stay away from the red areas and try to be in the green areas. And if it means you've got to cut harder earlier to have more green, then that's what you're going to have to do. This is a good model just to think through the various issues associated with the current crisis. Now, what else? Well, you've got to engage your customers with clear, consistent, understanding communications. And the word understanding is important there because it's about saying, I need them to know that I understand their business, the challenges they face. The one thing is clear about this industry, whether you're in cars, jobs, homes, doesn't matter. Your customers yesterday will be your customers today, will be your customers tomorrow. It's not like a whole bunch of new people are going to enter the industry. How you treat them in these times will reflect on you longer term. The move by Rightmove will be remembered and could have a detrimental impact on their revenues when times are less tough. People won't forget that they tried to just defer payment rather than give a discount when they clearly financially can give a discount. And you've got to be consistently communicating with them. They are going to be alone. They're going to be worried about their futures. They're going to be worried about their family futures. You are going to be a percentage of their cost base. So you need to think about how you can at least help them, whether it's new products, new services that make their life easier, makes them work remotely in a better way, or it's going to be potentially a discount, but clearly you've got to be a large profitable player to do those and sustain giving discounts to your customers. Put in place clear strategies and processes to manage your remote workforce. Use this time to get very clear on how am I going to manage in this new environment, because I need to make sure that when I come out of this crisis, I can operate in a new way if I want to. And I want to get the most out of my workforce today. You need to develop new and innovative products that meet the medium-term requirements of your customers. Short-term, they've got no money. They don't want to spend money. It's going to be very simple. You can do a few little things like we've seen the Lifels and the REAs and the Hemnets of the world do. That will help, but it's not going to change the market. But when things start coming back, how do you meet those medium-term requirements? What's going to be different? Talk to your customers, understand what they think is going to be different and how you can work with them. And if you have cash, acquire and consolidate the industry. Critical. If you can acquire and consolidate an industry, you will then be in a great position to dominate. Now that's a challenge, right? Because how much do you pay for the acquisition? How much do you how does that all really impact what is happening? Are you just putting together two companies that have no revenues, just costs? Is that doubling the problem? Or are you're going to come out of this together and just to be a stronger, dominant player in a market? So that's the summary of what I would do if I was in your situation. And clearly this is changing on a day-to-day and literally a week-to-week basis. Now, in putting this together, I asked for questions from people. And there's two ways we can do this. I've got a bunch of questions I'm going to start to walk through. And you feel free to jump on the Q&A box and ask questions. That'd be great. Or use the Zoom chat if you want to do that as well. Otherwise, I'm going to start working through some of these questions. The session we held about 6 or 7 hours ago for the Asia Pacific, we had a lot of questions. And I plan to spend the next half an hour just really discussing what's happening in these various businesses and what could be very germane to your business. So feel free to speak up, type away. It is easy to engage. But let's start with some of the questions that people are asking. Any view on how this crisis will differ from previous ones and the consequences for portals? Well, first of all, there are always crises. I was having a chat with Andrew from Homesters in the Ukraine, and he goes, well, we're used to crises of different sizes, and so when you're used to various crises in various parts of the world, you adapt to what's happening far faster. I think in a lot of the Western world, things have been pretty rosy and pretty simple for a long time, and this crisis comes as a bit of a shock. It's not going to be over soon. It's not going to be, as Donald Trump thinks, back business as usual by Easter, which is like 3 weeks. It's like there's absolutely no way that's going to occur. The big previous crisis we can look at would be the swine flu crisis. I didn't know actually much about it, but I'm not sure if you're aware, but it actually impacted somewhere between half a billion and 1 billion people got the swine flu. So dramatically more than we have the coronavirus at the moment, and around 500 million people died. So it was quite not 500 million, sorry, 500,000 people died. That would have been a lot, 500 million. 500,000 people died in that throughout that period of time. So clearly, the world's been through these crises before. I think what's different with this one is that the impact of social media, the impact of the constant news flow, and the fact that that, I think for a lot of people, this was a Chinese problem up until it hit Italy hard. And then hitting Italy hard made it far more real and far more everyday for people. And now we're seeing it sort of ripple around the world at a great rate of knots. So the consequences are it's going to be much tougher, going to last for longer, and you have to batten down the hatches, get very clear on what you're doing, what makes sense, what doesn't make sense, cut out those things that were interesting experiments that for the moment we don't need to do. What will the industry look like in 2021? And are we business as usual? Have things changed for good? I think there's sort of a spectrum, right? There's sort of three potential buckets of outcomes. One is it's sort of business as usual. We go back to portals and their customers operating in the same way they were operating before. Very much a case of the agent operating as the agent and so on. I think the next step is that everything is far more distanced now, far more remote in its operations, no social distance. Social distancing also becomes the norm, right? There's talk we have to maintain social distancing for 1 to 2 years, just because so the virus doesn't come back again and spread. So if that's the case, then a lot of the remote interaction with buyers and sellers will occur, because people need to start to transact, need to move houses, need to do a bunch of stuff. So they'll need assistance in doing it. So having the capacity to operate in that more distance way will occur. And I think the roles of portals, et cetera, can be far more around allowing that to happen through tools and products and services. Lead qualification, lead clarity. So at the end of the day, the agent at the end, or whomever at the end, is really just executing against something, dealing with a landlord, dealing with a vendor, dealing with a buyer or seller, and so on. The ultimate end is that the industry the real estate industry vaporizes, and that everything gets truly fragmented, gets collapsed, and portals or companies like portals take over a lot of the role that the agents did through products and services. And there are just a bunch of people who are contractors who do open for inspections, help form completion and doing all the compliance stuff. Everything is automated and so on. That's going to be a market by market outcome. But I think there are opportunities for the brave to really change the way real estate's done in your market. I've got a question here is what are the recommendations on marketing spend for the next 3 months? Don't, would be the summary. I think in reality, those who are truly looking to buy and rent should know who you are already. And if they don't, capturing them from someone else is going to be very hard unless you have a unique product and service and clearly not understanding your business. I can't answer that question in detail, but preserving of cash. Cash is king. I said at the beginning, I'll say at the middle, I'll say at the end, I'll say it probably 4 more times. Cash is king. So if you don't need to spend money on marketing, don't for the next 3 months. There's probably little point in doing it unless you've got cash to burn. But there's very few people sitting in that category, which really then flows into the next question, which is all around, what impact do you think this is going to have on the big boys? I think of the Rightmoves of the world. Well, first of all, they're fine. If you're Rightmove, you're sitting on a bunch of cash, you're not going to go from being a 75% EBITDA business to loss making. That would be an unfathomable decrease. What you will do is you will have maybe lose a third of your EBITDA, maybe more, because a £1 loss in revenue is a 75p loss in EBITDA. So it's almost, actually no, £1 loss in revenue will be a £1 loss in EBITDA, because you'll still have that cost base is already very skinny. So given that, and the fact that you're highly important in the industry means that you're not going to really, you're not going to disappear. You're not going to eat into your cash reserves. You're still going to be adding to your cash reserves. So they'll fare well. REA in Australia is the same. Zillow in the US has got 2.3 billion cash reserves. And they said, even if everything goes pear-shaped, all our mortgage business, etc. We've still got, at the end of 1 year, we'll still have $1.3 billion in cash reserves. And that's before any cost reduction. So I don't see them having any problems. The real issue is for the smaller guys. Those who are running a loss, haven't raised a lot of money, not really cash rich, or have low break even or low profitability, you're going to have problems. And that's where you've got to cut hard, cut fast, reduce the expenditure on your business so that you can not only survive, but also then thrive post-crisis. Impact of the PropTech space, PropTech venture space, there will be a slowdown in investment. It'll probably drop off a cliff. If people are investing, don't expect to get the valuations you got before. Don't expect to get 75% of the valuation you got before. And you better have a very, very good offer for people to offer you money. I think, your ingoing assumption should be, I'm not going to be able to raise any more money. I've got to be able to live off the funds that I've got at the moment, and really try to make that last as long as possible until the worm turns and you start to grow again. Once that occurs, make sure that your proposition really hits what the market needs. What strategies would you put in place as a startup to turn the crisis into an opportunity? Use this moment of time to really focus in on what's going to work for your business. I think a lot of startups think they've got a great idea, they've raised a bit of money, they're really trying to create something in a world where it's very hard to create. Find out really what's going to work in the industry, and then target that. And I think that's really all you can do. And this is going to be the moment of reckoning whether you go out of business or whether you stay in business by really getting focused on where the value is from all those people that you're trying to serve. Who will be the models that will do best and why? I think, once again, there's an interesting spectrum. If you're offering something like a CRM system to a real estate agency or a dealer management system to a car dealer, you're going to be pretty much okay, because these are core bread and butter. Gas, electricity, etc. Are needed to run businesses. In fact, in this case, gas and electricity may not be anymore because they'll be operating from home, but they still need the capacity to manage their inventory, manage their buyers, and do stuff. And remember, an agent has to do something. They're going to sit at home and they're going to be optimistic about the future. So, that's in nature who they are. And so given that, they're going to need their CRM system. So if you've got a CRM system, that'll do pretty well, as in not do as badly as other areas. I think the next one that will do well over time will be mortgages. Not mortgages, sorry, rentals. And I think the rental market will be something that will come back faster, because people will have to downsize. There'll be those who don't have a job, can't afford to pay the mortgage, will need to get out of the house they're in. They'll need to get a smaller apartment. Maybe they've got sick of living with their family in a small apartment and want to get a bigger apartment. So I think the rentals market and the capacity to make that a truly automated process will be, I think, a very interesting opportunity. I think the next one will be new developments. There's a lot of developers out there who have stock that they need to convert from bricks and mortar to cash to fund their business, to fund the next round of development. Because as we come out of the crisis, people will start buying again. People will will be wanting to move, and I think the developers who have the capacity to handle pricing quickly will then be doing good deals to move their stock. And then I think the last one will be the established home sales, because people will be sitting in this, oh my God, I've just gone through this crisis. My biggest asset is my home. It's maybe decreased by 10%. I just want to hold on to this asset. I don't want to lose it. I'm going to wait for the value to come back. Okay, and I think there's going to be a lot of that occurring unless there's a forced sale of some sort in the psyche. A question has come up is, what does the market need midterm? I think the market needs, I think the real opportunity midterm, and once again, the question is which market? And so Wendy, thanks for that. The reality is we'll need what the market really needs and depending who you think about it, is some degree of liquidity. Will people be able to sell their houses? Will people be able to buy houses? Will they be able to rent? How will they be able to transact in a way that allows them to achieve whatever the personal goal is for who's in the market? And that's going to need some liquidity in the market, right pricing of houses, setting of expectations at the right level, access to capital if needed for purchasers. For rentals, is going to need a smooth, efficient process. Social distancing will be super important so that people are no longer sitting on top of each other while they go through this process. I think they're the things that the market will need midterm, and building out those products and services will be quite critical. In terms of valuations, which James came up with, we talked about. We had a lot of questions this morning around valuations, and the question was, will valuations move? Yes, they'll come down. They'll be more like bricks and mortar valuations. People will be wanting to invest in companies that have profit or a chance of short-term profitability. I think that's going to be quite important in this whole process. I think the days of 10 times revenue or more are for the short term gone. Now it will come back. I mean, the world's not silly. There'll be, once the thing turns and people have got some good businesses, some of those good businesses are going to go through the roof again. What will be interesting is maybe the iBuy model will take off again, as it seems to be that people were super enthusiastic when Zillow announced their iBuy model. Then when the market turned and they degreased, they went from $65 down to $22, $25, whatever it was, about $25. They then announced that they were turning off the iBuyer or pausing the iBuyer, and the share price went up again. But the market can't work out whether it's excited about the iBuyer model or excited by not having the iBuyer model. It's all about, I think, the context at the time. We've talked about the models. Many portals in emerging markets have shifted toward the transaction model. In Europe, leading property portals are suffering since they're solely relying on advertising. Are leading European property portals considering entering the transaction model? Yes, but not at the moment. It doesn't make sense, right? If at the end of the day properties aren't transacting, you're not gonna make any money. You want to be ready for when a transaction occurs. Once again, if I was going to be in any part of the transaction stream today, it would be the rental part. Because if you think about it, if I can help a landlord and a renter come together, and I can manage the complete process for a fee, I'm going to get an ongoing subscription. A percentage of the money that goes through, a percentage of the money for handling, collecting of the rent, a percentage of the money for ensuring that you're going to get the rent, and maybe a percentage of the money for any of the services around the outside. If that can all be done electronically and through a central, some sort of central vehicle, I think you're going to create recurring revenues. And I think recurring revenues are ones that are long-term, highly valuable to any company. Keep asking questions, by the way. I've got more to go on what people have asked, but if you feel free to chime in and ask whatever question is on your mind. Let me just move this on. Here we go. What could property portals do better in terms of technology to foster property sales in the current market? The answer is very little, because it's out of your control. When we talked about that matrix of what's in your control and what's out of your control, right now, it's out of your control. You can provide tools to your customers to give them the chance to do better, but I don't think you're going to actually increase sales in the market. However, what I would be doing is working with developers. I'll be talking to them about, finding out their true pain points. I had a conversation the other day with someone, and I cannot remember who it was now, about understanding what the true pain, I think it was in Southeast Asia actually, about what the true pain point is for a customer in transactions, for a developer in its sales, and how much commission they were really willing to give. And what they've found is that the developers who were historically giving you 3% were now having to give you 6, 7, and 8%, which shows that long-term, that there's a lot more value in the market. So I think it's not just technology, but it's about understanding the true value that you can extract from the market given these moments of pain, and then positioning yourself to extract them. And then I would be working on technology products that are all about distance viewings, distance scheduling, open for home inspections, so that people can go without you having to physically meet them. Having the lock boxes with a number that can go in and have a look, and so on. There'll be a whole bunch of these products and services that emerge over time that aren't new, by the way. It's not like, oh my God, I've just come up with this. No, it's just the fact that the market is probably going to come to the technology where the technology's always been. In the US, we're starting to see properties sold online without being present. Is that a trend that is going to increase? And is the European market right for that? I think any market will be open to, if not selling the property online, reserving the property online. I think new home developments are a classic one where there's nothing to go and see anyway. So I think that will open up. I think selling properties online will, for investors, is a possibility, but for most people, it's going to be a relatively dramatic investment that they're going to have in their homes. And in that environment, people are not going to want to just spend the money without going and seeing. So I think there will be an increase, but it's not going to suddenly go to the extent where I'm just like Amazon, I'm buying a whole bunch of stuff and it gets delivered, because if I don't like it, I just send it back. Which of these trends do you see happening? Are we going to see a proliferation of online agencies? Yes, I think the purple bricks will meet the portals in a big way now, because of, as I talked before, about this spectrum, the one down at this end, which is all around trying to really question the role of agency in the future. And I think the purple bricks being bought by a Zoopla or something could fundamentally change the nature of the UK property market. Homeowners likely to sell privately and the role of estate agents become less necessary. Yes, but they're not going to sell privately. They're going to sell still through a service. Whether it's an estate agent, a portal, online agency, it's still through some service. I think very few are going to be literally doing everything by themselves, including the contracts. I doubt that's going to occur. So if you think of real estate agency as a whole bunch of processes, more and more are going to be self-serve and are going to be linked together by some sort of common technology. Blockchain, no idea. I'm not a guru on blockchain. Suffice to say, if the technology is good, it'll be used. But once again, I think the 99.9% of people don't even know what blockchain is. They think it's some sort of just a catchphrase that people use, and it's something that the techo guys in the background do. So maybe is the answer to that question. And just a few last questions. If you guys don't have any more questions, with the likely reduction in transaction volume, is now the time to double down on transaction-based models or revert to advertising? The answer is don't dramatically change your business model now, because you have to wait to see how the market comes out the other side. However, I'll be looking for ways in which I can help make what agency does today better. And if by doing that you work out you can do it yourself, then I think you're fundamentally getting into more transaction-based models anyway. What are some of the cost containment strategies? We've talked about that. People, marketing, facilities are the major buckets, and every other cost in the sun. Clearly no travel, because you can't. No benefits, no bonuses, etc., etc., etc. All the really obvious stuff just gets cut to the bone. Startup, and the final question I've got here from people who've asked questions is, what's your advice for startups raising money now? It's going to be tough, super tough. You have to have a very, very good proposition. You have to have shareholders who truly believe what you're doing. You're going to have to offer discounts on your share price, and don't get precious about it. And you have to be very much willing to demonstrate there's value. You're going to have to be prepared to offer convertible notes or performance-based shares, so that if you don't hit certain targets, the amount of shareholding can be increased and so on. Don't get too focused on preserving the value you've got. is my recommendation is get cash in. Cash is going to be king in these super tough times. Now, they're the sort of the prepared questions that I have. Are there any other sort of questions out there? Feel free to put them on the chat. Very happy to answer them in the next 3 or 4 minutes before we wrap up. But if there are none, we'll wrap up a little early. Oh, not a little early, like 3 minutes early. Given there are none coming up on the chat, I'd like to thank everyone for dialing in and participating today. Thank you very much. For those who asked questions, thank you. Interactive becomes so much more exciting when it is interactive and answering your questions. If any of you need help with getting through these incredibly tough times, please send me an email, reach out to me. I'm more than happy to have a chat and to see if there's stuff I can do. I'm seeing a lot of stuff occurring at the moment in the market, and I'm very happy to help share that advice and guidance to what's happening out there. I truly hope this has been a useful hour and a half of your day. I'll send out a survey later on today to just get your feedback. So thank you very much. I hope you all have a great day wherever you are in the world.